Welcome everyone. Welcome back to Dharma Podcast. As you know, in the last conversation that we rolled out, we started a series on the history of Bollywood, as we called it. With Sandeep, what we did in the last episode was we spoke about the evolution from its early inception days and gave an overview. So now, starting this episode onwards, we'll get into more details on each of the forces that influence his journey from here on till the OTT stage. We'll come to it at some point in time. The two forces that Sandeep called out in the overview, if you may recollect, one was the whole communist infiltration in the early stages of the film industry, and parallelly there was another set of forces that were playing, which was a Nawabi Islamic Urdu nexus, if I may call it that. So the overview covered both these aspects. In this conversation now with Sandeep, we'll get into more details about each of these forces. So thank you all for joining us, and let's start the conversation with Sandeep.
Hi, Sandeep.
Hi, Parag.
You, after giving the overview, essentially left the viewers with two aspects that I think that you began talking about. One was the infiltration of the communist ideology, and the other was these nexus of forces, which was largely Nawabi, Islamic, and Urdu, and they kind of came to dominate the early stages of Bollywood. So, can we get into more details of how it progressed or devolved from here on?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello and welcome. Good to be back with you again. So, like Parag framed it in his introduction, in the previous episode, I gave a kind of overview, a curtain raiser of sorts, for the overall trajectory of Bollywood's evolution, what was known as Hindi cinema, how it evolved at least over the last century. So, today we will do a deeper dive by taking specific aspects of this history. And this history of Hindi cinema, it roughly falls in the following timelines. This is, like a rough division of timeline over the last century. So, in the first stage, I call it the Toxic Thirties. These Toxic Thirties were the initial days where, like Parag said, of Islamic and communist ideologies which made inroads into cinema, Hindi cinema. The second stage in this timeline is the period of what I call as from independence to emergency. That is from 1947 to 1975. That's about 28 years, more than a quarter century. And the third phase in this timeline is the post-emergency period till liberalization. And the fourth stage is the post-liberalization period leading up to roughly 2006, 2007, even 2010. That is, this period, post-2006 or post-liberalization, is when the corporatization of Hindi cinema began. And it's still going strong. So this is what I roughly call as the post-liberalization period of Hindi cinema. That is when Bollywood actually became Bollywood. The name Bollywood, nobody calls it Hindi cinema anymore. The likes of Karan Johar kind of people actually popularized this ugly, imported, mentally colonized term called Bollywood. And the fifth and the final stage in this timeline is roughly begins from about 2010, 2012, all the way up to the present. That is the explosion of OTT. So with this brief background, let's first look at what I call the Toxic 30s or the 1930s. We need to remember that this period, the 1930s, was also when absolute charlatans like Muhammad Habib initiated the millennial project of whitewashing the dark corners, the dark blood-soaked chapters of the Islamic history of India. And in cinema, there is a counterpart to this in Hindi cinema. So, in the cinematic parlance, you had the glorification of absolute crap like Murli Azam, Salim Anarkali story, that genre of themes in Hindi cinema. Now, Parag, when I'll explain as we go along. When you look at the whole thing, when you connect the dots, it is clear that these things are not coincidental at all. So, like I said in the previous episode, I think I mentioned this in the previous episode, the 1930s, the Toxic 30s, were really when the communists infiltrated every sphere of what is known as humanities in academic parlance, which is language, literature, art, painting, drama, and cinema. But until the communists arrived on the scene, all art forms, they were created by individuals from the time of Valmiki. Every single work of art was the work of individuals, especially in literature. So, until these communists, burst upon the scene, for the first time, the communists turned art, all art forms, into an ideological or political movement, from art to politics. And we need to ask ourselves, if we are civilizationally rooted, we need to pose a fundamental question to ourselves. This is that question: which ideology or which school or which political party did Maharshi Valmiki, Bhagavan Vedavyasa, Kalidasa, Shudraka, Vishakadatta, Banabhatta, Bhartrahari, Tulsidas Goswami, Vemana, Sarvagna, Kumaravyasa, all these giants, all these eminent writers and literateurs, which school, which ideology, which party did they all belong to? Yes?
Absolutely.
So, this is where you have to explore at this fundamental level. You should gain an understanding, only then you will get clarity to understand the whole thing in a proper perspective. And all the works of these masters, our tradition regards Valmiki as a Maharshi. So also Vedavyasa, we call him Bhagavan Vedavyasa in tradition. So all their works, they have stood the test of time. They have become immortal and they are universal in their appeal. There is no world language in which Ramayana and Mahabharata have not been translated or adapted into different mediums. Basically, both Ramayana and Mahabharata are kavyas or long poetic narratives, narrative poetry. They have been adapted into almost every conceivable art form: painting, sculpture, brass work, temple sculptures, drama, derivative poetry, prose, theatre adaptations, and even cinema.
Yeah, that's fairly vast by itself.
Yeah.
The scope.
So look at that. So it is both. It has stood the. It has endured in the realms of both space and time. Space meaning the whole of Earth. Time meaning it is immortal. It is enduring. It is timeless. So from that to the absolute degradation of all art, by transforming it, by morphing it into an ideological or political movement. So this is where the seed lies. And the damage of transforming literature and cinema from art to political movement, like I said, this damage has been truly incalculable. And in many cases, the loss has been so enormous that it is irretrievable now. And how this happened, how this degradation happened, how this destruction happened, and who were all involved in this grand project of vandalism and destruction is also an interesting but very, very, very sickening story which I will narrate today. So, Parag, a simple question. What is the foundation of any movie, any film?
A story, a script.
Absolutely. Or writing.
Yeah.
Right. Now, which is where the story of today's episode also begins with writing or writers, to be more specific. So let's rewind all the way back to the year 1932. That year, an organization called the Indian Progressive Writers Association was founded in 1932. Now, look at the title, Indian
Progressive.
Writers Association. Art does not happen in groups. Literature does not happen in groups. It does not happen in an association. So, Indian, fairly understandable. Progressive. What is progressive?
I think the origin of
What
the
is
woke word.
progressive? So this is the late great Sri Sitaram Goel. He has a beautiful section in one of his books where it is subtitled "Words Which Defy Dictionaries." All of us must read that. Maybe I'll read out some excerpts in a standalone video. There he traces how the leftists have always played with language, how they have twisted, degraded, deformed, and perverted terms, certain familiar terms, to mean its entire opposite. One such word is progressive, as opposed to regressive. So they coin these and they give a different meaning.
It becomes a label. The opposite
Something.
becomes a label.
Okay. So progressive is one such word. People is another word. So you speak, when you say people, you speak on behalf of a collective. Did the collective appoint you as a spokesperson? No. But this is the linguistic perfidy that they, even as we speak, all this LGBTQ nonsense is that only.
The progressive word has come to
Basically that only. So progressive is one such word. People is another such word. Democratic is another such word. Liberal is another such word. So the list is nearly endless. So IPWA, Indian, is understandable. P, progressive writers. Here, you have to take these two words together. Progressive writers. They are not just any writers. So it was still understandable if you called it Indian Writers Association. Although there shouldn't be any Writers Association, but for convenience sake, for illustration sake, we'll accept it that Indian Writers Association. ठीक है, fine. Some like-minded people have come together and formed a group. ठीक है, we're sharing of mutual interests and things like that. But the deliberate use of the word progressive writers, they are not just any writers. They have to be progressive writers. And who defines who is a progressive? Communists Association. So at this depth you have to understand this. So this IPWA was formed in the year 1932, and IPWA was actually the poisonous child of something called Angare.
Sorry, say it again.
IPWA was the poisonous child of something called Angare.
Okay.
Angare, the Urdu word.
Okay.
Angare was basically, it means embers of burning coals. So Angare was basically a collection of 9 short stories and a one-act play in Urdu by the following writers: Ahmad Ali, Sajjad Zahir, Rashid Jahan, and Mahmuduz Zafar. So this was basically a anthology of short stories and one Urdu play. And this Angare, when it was released, it created a sort of a furor, almost a nationwide outrage, because this compilation, this anthology, launched a frontal assault against Maulvis, against the Islamic God, against all religions, and it also launched an all-out assault against what is today known as toxic masculinity and patriarchy. The milieu is essentially set in the Nawabi culture of Uttar Pradesh, what is today known as Uttar Pradesh, but in those days it was United Provinces. So these stories and the play, it blamed religion as both the cause of and the obstacle that prevented people from overcoming poverty. And it also gave a solution to overcome poverty and remove all the evils of the society back then. The solution was the adoption and implementation of socialist and communist ideas.
So dismantling of the society, which is the
All
standard
right.
tactic of commies.
All right. So it obviously generated enormous public fury, and the British government in United Provinces, it immediately banned Angare and burnt all its copies. It's available. But in the annals of communist glorification, such bans are celebrated as victories, and they are treated as vindications of their struggle against all and sundry. Now, with with the formation of IPWA, something else also happened in the very next year. As I'm going to narrate, you see the swiftness at which this movement took spread everywhere. So on 5th April 1933, another organization was formed. It was called League of Progressive Authors, or LPA, and this was announced by by two guys named Ahmad Ali, the same author of Angare, and his friend Mahmuduz Zafar. So they announced the formation of this League of Progressive Authors in a newspaper called The Leader, basically a UP based
Publication.
communist publication, very influential in those circles. And this League of Progressive Authors immediately went to work. In just 1 month, on May 23rd, 1933, most Indian progressive writers, those who called themselves as progressive writers, they assembled under the leadership of that same guy, Sajjad Zahir, in Bombay. A highly influential author and writer literature named Professor R.V. Jagirdar, it's a highly distinguished name. He was primarily a playwright, a dramatist. He wrote under the pen name of Sriranga. He was a Kannada writer.
Oh, okay.
Sriranga is a revered name in Kannada
Yeah.
literature even today, but he identified himself as a progressive author. Progressive, the word progressive in Kannada means Pragati Para. So this is a new concoction. No word called Pragati Para existed until these fellows came on the scene. So Sriranga, or Professor R.V. Jagirdar, he was one of the prominent attendees of this League of Progressive Authors, which met in Bombay in May 1933. Later in the same year, the inaugural conference of progressive writers in Kannada. The groups had been formed in all languages across India. This should be noted, very important. So the progressive writers in Kannada, they held their first conference in Mangalore. A guy called Kantappa Shettar was appointed as its president, and another writer, novelist, playwright called Niranjana, he was the secretary. And these activities eventually expanded, and they gave a definite shape and direction to the IPWA, Indian Progressive Writers Association. In an astonishingly swift span, IPWA began to spread its wings. Remember, this was undivided India.
Undivided India.
So it is there, it spread to all cities which are now in Pakistan as well. And in 1935, an IPWA chapter was established in London. Okay. So how it acquired, this kind of international
Footprint,
spread
yeah.
is a story I'll just come to. Okay. When at this inaugural establishment of IPWA's chapter in London, one of the great intellectuals named Minu Masani, remember him?
Yes, of course.
Yeah? So Minu Masani started his political ideological career as a die-hard Congress socialist. So this is what he writes. He was a participant in this IPWA inaugural chapter in London. This is what he writes, and I quote him. In the summer of 1935, when the present writer visited Britain as secretary of the Congress Socialist Party. He met the current products of these activities who confessed their communist views and condemned the Congress Socialist Party as reformist. Imagine the commies calling Congress Socialists as reformists. Imagine this. And by the time this writer returned to London a couple of months later, the 7th World Congress had met in Moscow. This is where the patronage for IPWA comes.
So I was about to ask who was kind of oiling the machine.
Okay. The 7th World Congress had met in Moscow, and these same young men expressed to him a desire to join the Congress Socialist Party on their return to India. This is where the story gets interesting. They did this a few months later under instructions not to join the Communist Party of India, but to form the Progressive Writers Association and to infiltrate into the Indian National Congress and the Congress Socialist Party.
So it was actually
close quote. So you see, why is it surprising to today witness the fact that Rahul Gandhi's closest advisors are far left extremists? So the seeds are here. Explicit in black and white. He says, commies were instructed right from by Moscow to infiltrate the Congress Party and to not join CPI. Okay. And now let's cut to July 1936. That year, the Progressive Writers Association was set up in Calcutta, another chapter. And earlier in the same year, that is on 10th April 1936, the All India Progressive Writers Association was founded in a physical structure named Rifa-e-Aam Club in Lucknow.
okay.
And this foundation in this club was done under the leadership of the same duo, Syed Sajjad Zahir and Ahmad Ali. Guess who were the celebrity attendees of this foundation in Lucknow? Munshi
Nehru.
Premchand.
Okay.
He became the president, and Sarojini Naidu.
Oh, so they got their cloak of respectability with the advent of these.
All right. Now, there is an interesting history to this Rifa-e-Aam Club in Lucknow. This was a birthplace and incubator of the IPWA, like I said. It is also where a man named Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi delivered his first series of speeches calling for the Hindu-Muslim Brotherhood in 1920.
Okay.
This was the venue. And the Rifa-e-Aam Club was founded and patronized continuously by the Nawabs of Awadh. It was founded in 1860. Now, do these things partially explain the heavy influence and dominance of the Urdu and Nawabi culture in Hindi cinema?
It does. It does.
These are the
Directly attributed, traced.
foundational things. Now let's get back to the IPWA story again, and this is also where it gets rather interesting and intriguing. After the mega success of the 1936 Rifa-e-Aam Club event, Zahir and Ali, they invited Urdu eminence. In those days, he was a big name. His name is Syed Fakhruddin Balli, popularly known as Balli Ali or Balli Alig. They invited this Balli Alig to join the IPWA, and he joined. And once he joined, he initiated a series of measures to promote and popularize and propagandize this IPWA. And it succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, beyond their own wildest dreams. Writers, poets, novelists, playwrights, they swarmed this virgin progressive soil like locusts, high on a dose of LSD. And here is a brief list of names who joined this IPWA, this IPWA at various points in time. Hamid Akhtar, Faiz Ahmad Faiz, Ahmad Nadeem Qasmi, Saadat Hassan Manto, Ismat Chugtai, Mulkraj Anand, Dr. Joshi Prasad, Pramod Ranjan Sengupta, Munshi Premchand, Maulvi Abdul Haq, Chirag Hassan Hasrat, Abdul Majid Salik, Maulana Hasrat Mohani, Josh Maliha Badi, Professor Ahmad Ali, Dr. Akhtar Hussain Raipuri, Professor Manjun Gorakhpuri, Dr. Rashid Jahan, Sahibzada Mahmood Uz Zafar, Professor Manzoor Hussain, Dr. Abdul Alim, Ali Sardar Jafri, Shibte Hassan, Ehtesham Hussain, Mumtaz Hussain, Sahir Ludhianvi, Kaifi Azmi, Ali Abbas Hussaini, Majru Sultanpuri, Amrita Preetham, Rajinder Singh Bedi, and Bhisham Sahani, and a man named Jan Nisar Akhtar, father of Javed Akhtar. What is noticeable in all these names is rather straightforward. In this case, the minority was the majority in IPWA.
And not, yeah, and they've left their stamp or indelible footprint.
Wait, I'm just getting started. And all of these guys were hardcore communists, and they were self-declared warriors, not only against British imperialism, but imperialism of all kinds, including what they called the imperialism of Congress and Gandhi. And they were also the self-proclaimed champions fighting against poverty, and the leaders of the new political economic cult called socialism. And it was their hardened conviction that socialism, communism alone held a magic key to solve all the problems of India. And they demanded justice in the name of the tillers of the soil, the laborers of the oppressed laborers of the factory, and the mill workers and the laborers in the dockyards and railway stations and the rest. But a core element of the Indian Progressive Writers Association was this. And you know, this part of this core has been very cleverly, very shrewdly brushed under the carpet. And the fact is that by all accounts, IPWA was overwhelmingly dominated largely by the Nawabi or the Ashraf Muslim elite of Uttar Pradesh and surrounding remnants of Mughal Raj. Okay, it was dominated by this Ashraf elite. But a good number of Hindus who were brainwashed into communism were also members of the cult, and so they had to toe the line. So the situation that finally emerges when we look at this historical survey of the Indian Progressive Writers Association is the fact that it preached socialism and alleged equality and justice to Hindu writers who were part of that association. But in reality, it was an extremely safe haven for all kinds of Islamic bigots who were schooled by the legacy of that architect of Pakistan known as Syed Ahmad Khan. In fact, many history books in Pakistan, not India, Pakistan, says that after Syed Ahmad Khan's revolutionary reforms in education, giving education for the Muslim community, second only to that is the impact that was created by this Urdu Nawabi culture dominated Indian Progressive Writers Association. This is what Pakistan says.
It's written in their books.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's there.
But true, I mean, let's face it, it's true.
It is true. It is true. Look, the point about all this is that those guys don't lie. They're very clear and they're very vocal about their overall project of Islamizing. So to that much honesty, we have to give them credit. But anyway, now, despite having such a enviable nationwide membership, the IPWA soon lost its dominance. It lost its steam. By 1938, it had almost sputtered to death, largely because of one factor. The British colonial government had banned the Communist Party of India. So from the first to the last, Parag, the IPWA was an organ of the Communist Party of India. So like I said, Parag, the Indian Progressive Writers Association was an organ of the Communist Party of India from start to finish. Now, like I said, in 1938, the British banned the CPI, and so with that, the IPWA also kind of sputtered to almost it was in its deathbed. And then the next phase of the IPWA arrived in the year 1942, when the British lifted the ban on CPI for a straightforward reason. Because under instructions from Moscow, Britain had become an ally of the USSR to fight a monster called Hitler. So therefore, the Imperial British government also lifted the ban on the CPI in India. So in that year, under direct orders from Moscow, Indian communists began to systematically sabotage the Quit India movement and in general the freedom struggle itself. This is a well-known story, but it's a story that merits a separate episode. So we'll, look at it some other day. So, in April 1942, the IPWA was revived in Calcutta by launching something called an Anti-Fascist Writers and Artists Union. Look at the name.
Huh?
Anti-Fascist Writers and Artists Union, it seems. So this is like a factory union, no? Where is art in this? Where is cinema in this?
And where was
Where is
fascism?
literature in this?
And where was fascism?
So
anyway?
basically, what do you mean anti-fascist writers? Look at the terminology. Those who are not progressive are fascist.
Fascist.
Simple. End of story. And this this anti-fascist writers and artists union, that also soon fizzled out with the arrest of a guy called S.S. Chauhan, who was the editor of the Hindi monthly Hans.
Okay.
It was a Hindi monthly magazine. And another round of revival of the IPWA occurred in Bombay on 22nd May 1943, which is incidentally my birthday. So this revival occurred in Bombay in 1943 under the direct leadership of a horrible monster named Shripad Amrit Dange. S.A. Dange.
S.A. Dange.
Okay. And he was a member of the Central Committee of the CPI, a very powerful body in their scheme of things. And he organized a 3-day conference in which he extended an open invitation to all writers, all Indian writers, to support Britain's war effort against Hitler. And he also extended the invitation to serve the progressive cause. And two important outcomes occurred as a result of this conference. One, the IPWA's headquarters were shifted out of Lucknow and relocated to Bombay, and new office bearers were also appointed. I'll read out a couple of names. The same guy, Sajjad Zahir, remember?
Yeah.
Angare,
Angare.
that guy. He became the president. K.A. Abbas became the joint secretary, and Mama Varerkar became the treasurer. He's supposed to be a big name in Marathi literature. Mama Varerkar. And in the next step, S.A. Dange launched a massive all India recruitment drive of Muslim writers and artists.
Also specific to a community.
Specific to the community. And on October 14th, 1945, the Communist Party of India held the All India Conference of Urdu Progressive Writers exclusively. Notable eminences who made speeches include Maulana Hasrat Mohani, Krishan Chandar, and Mulk Raj Anand. And once again, Srimati Sarojini Naidu inaugurated this conference. All right. So this forms a, a very good foundation for what we will see next. How these writers eventually spilled over to Bollywood, Hindi cinema, what all they did. But in passing, uh, let's take the name. But in passing, we have to give credit to some of the members, some of the writers of these of this IPWA, especially Urdu writers, who expose the hypocrisies and backwardness and other regressive practices of their own community.
They did?
They did.
Okay.
They did. In a big way, they did. And leading the charge, or one of the eminent guys who exposed the hypocrisy of his own community, was a guy called Sadat Hasan Manto, a famous short story
Yes,
writer.
yes, yes.
And one of his short stories talks about a fakir who visits a decrepit village somewhere in North India. And this fakir, he visits the house of a guy, of a poor farmer who's living from hand to mouth. He's divorced and his wife is living in a different village, and he has a nubile young daughter who's just reached puberty. And this fellow, he uses his fakir, his power as a fakir, basically a Muslim divine who's revered in the community. He uses that to gain access to this poor Muslim farmer's family, and he seduces his daughter, and then he convinces the father to bring back, to reunite with his wife. And then he reunites with her, but they have to get married. But in their community, they have this practice, no,
Yeah.
that she has to get married first to another man, consummate the marriage, and then reunite with her original husband. So this fakir seduces his wife also.
Oh my God.
All right. So this is and
Nothing is right about this.
and it is eventually revealed that he is not a fakir at all.
Ah.
So after consummating the marriage with this poor farmer's wife, he leaves the village forever, and the wife wakes up and finds under her pillow fake beard and fake hair. That guy is a hatta katta young man who has his eyes on both the mother and the daughter.
And this
So
was written by?
This is written by Sadat Hasan
Manto.
Manto. It's a delightful story in many ways. It's very disgusting to read. But eventually what happened, as it always happens, is that these writers, when they hit back, remember that they were targeting the Islamic clergy, which will invite severe consequences, horrendous backlash.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Especially if it is done by one of their own community members. All right. And that backlash came. How many Urdu writers do you know today? At least not today, at least in the last 30-40 years, who have dared to write something like this? Parag, take it from me. No, don't take it from me. But history shows that it is always the ulema that wins the day.
Absolutely.
Temporary setbacks, but they score the ultimate victory. Yeah.
Wasn't Manto killed?
I don't know. I don't know if he was killed. I don't think he was killed. But anyway. And then you have this other great man named Jan Nisar Akhtar.
Yes, of course.
Mr. Javed Akhtar's father. And his rather interesting relationship with the Nehru clan. Let me read out some tidbits of Jan Nisar Akhtar's closeness with the Nehru dynasty. Jan Nisar Akhtar was commissioned by the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, to collate the best Hindustani poetry of the last 300 years, and later the first edition of this book, titled Hindustan Hamara, came out in 2 volumes, and it was released by none other than Srimati Indira Gandhi. Of all people, of all poets in India, in Hindi,
Which was
Nawab Nehru could not find any any other person than Jan Nisar Akhtar to write what? To write to collate the best of Hindustani poetry. All right, and yeah, it was released by Srimati Indira Gandhi, and he also got other government goodies like the Sahitya Academy for Award for Urdu in 1976. So, my dear friend Parag, is it any surprise that Jan Nisar Akhtar's son Javed Akhtar and his daughter-in-law Shabana Azmi both became Rajya Sabha MPs under a Congress-led government? Is it a coincidence?
man, he carried the legacy of his father beautifully.
Very beautiful.
The scriptwriter for Sonia Gandhi's speeches, right?
No, Maut Ka Saudagar,
Maut Ka Saudagar,
Zahir Ki Kheti,
Zahir Ki Kheti, exactly.
this kind of thing. So, yeah, we will get into those aspects in the forthcoming episodes.
You heard Sandeep break down the series into time spans, and he got into extensive detail, and the period he calls it was the Toxic 30s. So, Toxic 30s, starting 30s to the phase of emergency. And he traced back the origins of infiltration right up to Moscow, which was a revelation, I'm sure, to many of us, and several other nuggets that he unveiled in the course of the conversation, which is what he brings to the table every time we get into a serious discussion with him. So, thank you, Sandeep, for revealing those fascinating nuggets and insights into how the commies and the Nawabi nexus infiltrated with great amount of accuracy. We shall continue the conversation with Sandeep next week. Please join us on Dharma Podcast again. Please like, share, subscribe, and recommend the content so that more such conversations can be brought to light. We thank you for your patronage. See you again.